Hello, class, and welcome to week 10. We are at the home stretch, and I know with it being close to finals that some of your anxiety levels may be a little high. And so, what better way to kick off our week other than to discuss motivation? So, you got it. Our topic for this week is motivation. We hear people use the word motivation often. For example, when players stay on the field an extra 30 minutes after the end of practice to keep working on a skill, we say they are motivated athletes. When students like yourself seek out extra learning opportunities to go beyond a course's general requirements, which I know all of you guys do on a regular basis, you're not just doing reading, you're doing other things, right? Okay. But when students go above general course requirements, they are described as motivated learners. But what does motivation have to do with working in a business? Are all of the business owners and managers' actions motivated solely by profit? And does an employer who pays well always have strongly motivated employees? These are questions to really ponder, but with this week's lesson, we'll examine motivation in detail and look at techniques that are used or have been used in the past and is used in the present to motivate employees. So let's start out with our discussion this week. I want to know what drives you to do your personal best. I want you to think about that because I'm going to ask this question in class. What drives you individually to do your personal best? So, even when pursuing your personal goals, each of us retains and we lose our motivation for very individual reasons. Think of times that you've pushed to be your best, whether at school, in sports, or in other activities. Is it easier for you to build enthusiasm for tasks that you're sure you can accomplish? Or do you personally set difficult goals and draw energy from the challenge of attaining them? Which one do you fall in? Some people need immediate gratification or success in order to stay motivated. So a lot of us, some people, I'm not saying a lot, are driven by immediate results. I got to see those results right away in order for me to stay motivated, right? So if not, then I'm going to fall off on the motivation wheel. Others are able to postpone short-term success in the pursuit of long-term gains. So, do you need to be rewarded immediately for what you do, or are you more motivated by long-term benefits? Now, think about how hard you work when you receive a lot of positive feedback, either financial or emotional. Is getting praise or money for a job important to you, or are you driven more by the values of the place that you work, your beliefs, or in doing a good um, job or a job well done? So, for some people, being part of the accomplishments of a team is what motivates them. You may not be sure what exactly motivates you. If so, there are tests that you can take to determine really your own motivational style. And we may or may not have time to do those tests in class, but there are tests that exist and that's out there. Um, Really quickly, I want to talk about flow and the flow state. Um, so, quick question. Think about a time when you were absolutely focused on the task, when you were able to block out the outside world and get into what I call a zone. Psychologists refer to this feeling as the flow. What you do, or what do you think contributed to your feeling of the flow in a situation that you're remembering? So, it takes different, for some people, it's different things to get us into the flow. It could be the time of day that you're focusing, it could be something else that's happening around you that helps you to be able to focus. Um, so part of, getting things done with motivation, I only bring this up because it is getting close to finals week, is figuring out what gets you into that flow state where you are completely involved and focused on what you are doing. Often people produce their best work, make the best use of their skills, and feel the most pleasure when they are in such a state or a flow state. They feel a strong match between their own abilities um, and the challenge of the task. It's neither too difficult, which can lead to frustration, nor too simple, which can lead to boredom. So they report a sense of control over what is happening and a feeling of effortlessness in their work. So how do you create this sense of flow? Um, Creating a workplace that fosters this kind of motivation is called organizational psychology, and we're not going to talk much about that today, but I love it. But I wanted to get you to understand flow and finding that flow state, and when you know best of how you get into that flow, trying to tap into that as much as possible to stay motivated to complete your task. Our objectives for this week is to define motivation, and we're going to explain the difference between intrinsic and extrinsic rewards. Know that Alicia did a really good lead into this week's lesson with her presentation last week. So it was awesome. It was awesome timing. We're also going to discuss and identify and describe theories of motivation based on employee needs. Theories of motivation is what it's all about. It's very, very important. Anytime motivation is discussed, you can't discuss it without talking about a theory. And Alicia also touched on this briefly last week as well. We're going to explain process theories of motivation. We're going to describe the reinforcement perspective and how it can be used to motivate employees. Also, discuss some of the challenges or approaches to job design and how job design influences motivation. Finally, we're going to talk about power, how empowerment heightens employee motivation, and ways that managers can create a sense of meaning and importance through employee engagement. So that's what our learns are for this week. And then that's what we're going to focus on. So let's dive into it. So let's define motivation. Motivation actually refers to the forces either within or external to a person that helps them to arouse enthusiasm and persistence to pursue a certain course of action or even a certain goal, right? So, employee motivation affects productivity, and part of the manager's job is to channel motivation toward accomplishment of those goals. So the study of motivation helps managers understand what prompts people to initiate action. So it's really important. What influences their choice of action and why they persist in that action over time. So there is this model of motivation. And what this model and what you're seeing in front of you, what it demonstrates is that people have basic needs such as food, achievement, and money. We talked about this a little bit before, earlier on, but um, people have basic needs, and those needs that they have motivate specific behavior designed to fulfill those needs. So, if I have a need of money, then my behavior, or it's gonna, or my sorry, my behavior, yeah, will be designed to fulfill those needs, and so that's going to drive my motivation. And so that's what you are seeing here. So here's the need, then it's going to lead to certain behavior, right? And then hopefully that behavior leads to rewards that's going to fulfill those needs. And then now you have this sort of feedback loop, which informs people whether the behavior was appropriate or did it work. And so, should they then do the same thing or should they try something else, right? So, the feedback tells people whether they were successful in fulfilling their needs. If so, they will feel rewarded by their success. In the workplace, there are some external motivating factors that managers can control. These motivators are called extrinsic motivators, which include things such as pay, promotion, and verbal praise. Other factors called intrinsic motivators are outside of the set of factors under a manager's control because they are internal to each and every one of us. They're internal to each individual employee. These motivation or motivating influences are really based on the person's actual interest in his or her work, and they stem from the sense of purpose or value a person derives from the work being done. So, intrinsic rewards are the satisfactions a person receives in the process of performing a particular action, and extrinsic rewards are given by another person, typically a manager, and include, like I said, pay, promotions, and other things that employees value, such as time off. So let me provide to you an example. In 2006, and there was an educational study in England. That study showed the differences between the two types of motivators. Children from a boys' school and a girls' school were asked to make a poster about their lives. One group was told its poster would decorate a local hospital for sick children. Then the other group was told that it would be paid for its work. Which group of children would produce the better work? Those who perceived the task as being worthwhile, or those who were promised payment? In this case, much more sophisticated and detailed work actually came from the group that was working for free. The children were motivated more by the knowledge that they would be helping sick children than by the financial reward. So that was an intrinsic motivator. So different people have different balances really between intrinsic and extrinsic motivators, but um, since there's difference and balances, how do you think managers can best motivate all of their employees? Hmm. It's a challenge. It's a very delicate balance. It's a challenge often at times, but um, you know, it's hard. This is one that I struggle with as well. But an individual motivated intrinsically is really working for his or her own satisfaction and may value challenging work that he or she perceives as meaningful to the company more than like extrinsic factors such as pay. Also, intrinsic motivators tend to be higher on Maslow's hierarchy, which we're going to go into next. But just keep this in mind as we transition into Maslow. For example, a boss who offers unsatisfying work, even though he or she offers bonuses and promotions, will have difficulty really motivating an intrinsically motivated worker for the most part. So there was this man named Abraham Maslow. He was an early researcher in the area of human motivation between the time of like 1908 and 1970. Oh, wow, he was alive almost when I was born. He published a book, The Hierarchy of Needs, in 1954. Um, in his theory, so in his theory, sorry, I got interrupted for a second, but in his where was I? In his theory of motivation, Maslow suggests that humans have a hierarchy of needs and that the primary needs are met first before higher level needs are addressed. The first needs to be met are inborn basic needs termed physiological needs, as you could see here. And I wish we had a picture of the pyramid. It might be on the next slide. Let me see really quick. Nope, nope, that's too complicated. All right, yes, physiological needs, such as the need for water, food, sleep, and reproduction. This means that before we as humans can think about anything else in our lives, we must ensure that these basic physiological needs are met. Once our physiological needs have been met, Maslow's theory holds that people strive to satisfy then safety needs. And usually these are at the bottom, right? Because they're going in this pyramid. Um, so, safety needs. This includes establishing safe and stable places to live and work. And then, once both the physiological and safety needs have been met, we can consider social or belonging needs, which includes the need to belong to a group and to feel accepted by others. The next up in the hierarchy are the esteem needs, and these are satisfied by the mastery of a skill and by the attention and the recognition of others. It helps with our self esteem. Finally, at the top, well, on our little chart at the bottom, but it's a pyramid and it would be at the top. At the top of this hierarchy are the self-actualization needs, and these needs include the desire to maximize one's own potential through education and self-fulfillment and experiences, beauty, spirituality, all of those things. So these higher level self-actualization needs cannot be addressed unless and until the lower levels of needs have been adequately met. Maslow suggested that different people find themselves at different places, really, in the hierarchy, in the hierarchy, and so their motivations may be different. While an offer of overtime pay may be a successful motivator for one person concerned with safety needs, it might be opposite of what someone working to satisfy their need for self-actualization finds motivating. So that's where this puzzle sort of falls in. Um, So here's just a little diagram of kind of like what I was talking about. So as you can see at the bottom of this pyramid are the physiological. It then moves to safety, belonging, esteem, and self-actualization, and what the fulfillment on the job may look like, and what the fulfillment off the job may look like in order to satisfy those needs. So there was this ERG theory that was developed by a man named Clayton Adlerfer. And this is a modification actually of Maslow's theory. The ERG theory identified basically three categories of needs. The first category being existence needs. And as you can see here, the existence needs are the needs for physical well being, similar to Maslow. Again, these psychologists, they all stem from each other, and it's like kind of, I look at it as, no, I'm right. This is the real theory. This is what motivates people. And then there's another philosopher and psychologist that comes around and says, no, but this is really what motivates people, or so forth and so on. But this is very similar to me, to Maslow's. And so then there's a second category that's relatedness needs. These pertain to the need for satisfactory relationships with others. Sound familiar, right? Belonging. And then the third category are growth needs. And so these needs focus on the development of human potential and the desire for personal growth and increased competence. So, you know, the ERG model and Maslow's need hierarchy are similar as both are I'm sorry, hierarchical. Did I say that right? Hierarchical. Oh, yeah. To me, a higher order need, sorry, hierarchical, and presume individuals move up the hierarchy one at a time. That's basically it. So they are both, you have to move up, you have to satisfy one need before the other can be accomplished. So, um, the model, the ERG model, contains a frustration, and I'm going way too fast. It contains a frustration regression principle, suggesting that failure to meet a higher order need may trigger regression to an already fulfilled lower order need. For example, a worker who cannot fulfill a need for personal growth may revert to a lower order social need and redirect efforts toward making a lot of money. Um, the ERG model suggests that individuals may move down as well as up the hierarchy depending on their ability to really satisfy those needs. Need hierarchy theory really explains why organizations recognize employees, encourage decision making, and offer opportunities to contribute to the organization and society. Many companies find that creating a human work environment that allows people to achieve a balance between work and personal life is a great high level motivator. As you can see in this chart right here, this chart is actually demonstrating the link or the relationship between motivation benefits of job flexibility. And so in the pink, you could see employees who have control over their work schedules and their level of commitment versus the burnout score versus employees who lack control over their work schedules here in like the green. And so employees that have control over their work schedule have a higher level of commitment to their job versus employees who lack control over their work schedule. And then, if you could look here at the correlation in terms of employees really being burnt out and just done and tired, employees who have control over their schedules and have autonomy, a lot less rate of burnout, which just makes sense, right? Than employees who lack control over their work schedule. So it just says a little bit about motivation and in terms of just certain needs being met. I would challenge you to answer the question, where does this fall on the hierarchy? Which category does it fall for both ERG as well as Maslow? Flexibility and work flexibility. Where does that fall? Think about that. Let's talk about now our third psychologist. Um, So, our third psychologist is a psychologist by the name of Frederick Herzberg. Um, he actually lived to be into he lived into 2000, right? 1923 to 2000, so he didn't die too long ago. But in 1959 he proposed a theory for job satisfaction called the motivator hygiene theory, or the two factor theory is what we like to call it. um, so according to the theory, two factors influence a person's motivation. Hygiene factors being first. These hygiene factors are factors such as a safe working environment, proper pay and benefits, and positive relationships with coworkers. People rarely notice hygiene factors if they are present. However, if hygiene factors are absent or inadequate, people tend to be really dissatisfied. Consider basic working conditions, benefits, and other company policies. If there suddenly is no heat in the place where you work, or if your pay is cut, you may be motivated to find a way to meet those needs. But if these are already in place, they are taken care or they're taken for granted and may not serve to motivate you. The second set of factors in Herzberg's theory are motivator factors. These factors include a sense of responsibility and recognition, promotion, and job growth. So consider the self actualization needs from Maslow's hierarchy. If there is no path for growth in your job or little recognition of your achievements, you probably would not immediately quit, but it would create a set of conditions that fail to motivate you. So that's our two factor theory, and that's Herzberg. So as you can see here, on this little chart, you could see the motivators and you could see the hygiene factors, and how they relate. So essentially, a manager's role is to provide hygiene factors that meet basic needs, and use motivators to meet higher level needs to propel employees toward achievement and satisfaction. So basically, they need both in order for employees to be motivated and satisfied. So let's now talk about our fourth theory. Let's talk about Dr. McClellan and acquired needs. So, other researchers have proposed different models to map human needs to motivation. Psychologist David McClellan now has another theory, right? He calls it the three needs theory, and it suggests that there are three main motivators. The first one is the need for achievement. So that's the need to accomplish something difficult on your own. The second one is the need for affiliation, or the need to form close personal relationships with other people and avoid conflict and establish warm friendships. Third and lastly, the need for power, to the power to be able to control the behaviors of others. And so, according to McClellan, um, which need we try to satisfy really depends on a variety of complex factors, including our cultural background. Although an individual may have multiple needs, McClellan really suggests that one tends to dominate over the other. So, in a workplace, this theory could account for differences in motivation among coworkers. For example, a person whose main need is for affiliation may have little motivation to perform a solitary task, whereas a person with a high need for achievement may be highly motivated to perform a difficult task alone. So, that's McClellan's theory. So here are implications for management. People with a high need for achievement are frequently entrepreneurs. People who have a high need for affiliation are successful integrators whose job is to coordinate the work of several departments in an organization. And a high need for power is associated with successful attainment of top levels in an organizational hierarchy. So that so, process theories explain how employees select behaviors with which to meet their needs and determine if their choices were successful. The first one is of the process theories, is goal setting. And so, goal setting theory really proposes that specific, challenging goals increase motivation and performance when the goals are accepted by subordinates who receive feedback to indicate progress toward goal achievement. So, with the goal setting theory, it includes four components essentially. The first one is goal specificity. God, these words, specificity, tongue tire. But specificity, which is really the degree to which goals are concrete and unambiguous. The second one is goal difficulty. The notion that hard goals are more motivating than the easier ones. Thirdly, the goal acceptance, which is the notion that hard goals are more, I'm sorry, that employees must buy into the goals and be committed to them. And finally, feedback, which people get information about how well they are doing and progressing toward goal achievement. Goal setting increases motivation because it enables people to focus their energies in the right direction. As you know, goals are really, really important. People know what to really work towards so they can direct their efforts toward the most important activities to really accomplish their goals. And goals also energize behavior because people feel compelled to develop plans and strategies to accomplish their objectives. So let's move into our next theory, which is the equity theory. And I know you guys are like theoried out, but these kind of all tie together really. The equity theory was developed by Stacey Adams, which focuses on individuals' perception of how fairly they are treated relatively to others. And so the equity theory um, really suggests that people evaluate equity by a ratio of inputs to outcomes. So inputs to a job include things such as education, experience, effort, and ability, and outcomes from a job include things such as pay, recognition, benefits, and promotions. So the ratio may be compared with another person in a work group or to a perceived group average. So if people perceive that their input to outcome ratio is equal to that of those whom they compare themselves, they believe that treatment is fair and equitable. Equity exists when the ratio of one person equals the ratio of another person. So inequity exists when the ratios are not actually equal. So um, methods for reducing a perceived inequity, and I know many of us have been in a situation where we feel like maybe an employee works as hard as we do, or we work harder than that employee, and um, we're not compensated in the same manner or as well, and vice versa. But some things to reduce this from a management perspective is to change work effort by decreasing the level of effort or increasing um, absenteeism. Change outcomes by obtaining a salary increase or um, additional benefits or perks. Distort perceptions by artificially increasing the status of attached to one's job, um, or leave the job if equity cannot be restored through any of the previous methods. You can leave the job. So it's not all right. So we've talked a lot about theories thus far and the different kinds of theories. Just take it all in. There's another one. This one I like a lot, though. It's really relatable. It's referred to sometimes as Vroom's model or expectancy theory. So although Maslow's hierarchy and the other theories describe human motivation, they do so in terms of an overall model for employees or for all employees. In 1964, a gentleman by the name of Victor Vroom proposed a theory named expectancy theory, which has been developed by other researchers since. But essentially, the expectancy theory suggests an individual's motivation can be described by the relationship among three um, psychological forces. So he put forward the formula or the following formula to describe the motivation a person feels in any given situation. Now your formula is different right here or in your book by the from the way that I learned it, but it'll make sense. Well, a simple way to look at this is motivation equals expectancy times instrumentality times valence. So motivation equals expectancy, which is E. So forget this minus P. Expectancy times P, I call instrumentality, times V, which is valence. So let's break this down. Expectancy is the idea that a person's effort has an appreciable effect on a situation's result, whether it is a success or a failure. So, does working harder lead to a more positive outcome for an employee and or the company? Or does it even make a difference? This is what expectancy measures. Instrumentality, they have it as P for whatever reason. Instrumentality refers to the idea that the outcome of the situation is related to rewards or punishment. So, for those of you who are extrinsically motivated, instrumentality answers the question, what are the chances I'm going to be rewarded if I do a good job? For those who are intrinsically motivated, instrumentality answers the question, how good will I feel if I accomplish this task? Finally, valence is the importance that the individual places on the expected outcome of a situation. So it answers questions such as, how great a reward will there be if my performance is exemplary? And how serious a punishment do I expect if I underperform? So, in common terms, Bloom's formulas for high and low motivations read as follows. If your high motivation, my work actually affects the outcome. So let's look at this formula in terms of high and low motivation. So let me just break it down this way. So for high motivation, my work actually affects the outcome, which is expectancy, times there's a good chance I'll get rewarded if this works out, which is instrumentality, times if it works out, it'll be a really big reward, which is valence. Um, and so that will equal, high motivation. Low motivation equals nothing I do is going to impact the situation, expectancy, times even if it goes well, I probably won't see any benefit, instrumentality, times the only reward from this is incredibly small. So if basically if my thoughts are that I'm not going to be really motivated to do anything, versus if I think I'm going to get something, it's going to be effective and it's going to affect the outcome and the reward will be big, then I'm highly motivated to do a good job. Get it? So it's easier to think about it in those terms. So the reinforcement theory looks at the relationship between behavior and its consequences. So behavior modification, as you see here, is the application of a pleasant and rewarding consequence followed by a desired behavior. So praise for a job well done increases the likelihood of the excellent work behavior will occur again. So studies show that positive reinforcement actually improves performance. Avoidance learning is the removal of an unpleasant consequence followed by a desired behavior, and sometimes called negative reinforcement. So employees learn to do the right thing by avoiding unpleasant situations. An example would be when a supervisor stops criticizing an employee once the incorrect behavior has stopped. And punishment um, is we know what punishment is, but it's the application of unpleasant consequences following undesirable behavior. So the use of punishment in organizations is controversial because it fails to really indicate the correct behavior. So almost all managers find a need to impose punishment occasionally, from reprimands to employee suspensions or fires. As I see, I should have been showing this slide. I go too fast. I go ahead of myself sometimes when I'm pouring with knowledge. But if you see here, the last one is extinction, and that is the withdrawal of a positive reward following undesirable behavior. So, the withdrawal of a positive reward following undesirable behavior. So, extinction involves withholding pay raises, pay, and other positive outcomes. So, behaviors not positively reinforced will most likely um, occur in the future as a result of this. So, um, you withhold someone's pay or stop it, or make it extinct. I don't know if you're going to really have good outcomes, and it's definitely not going to be a way to motivate someone. So let's drop. I don't know. Do I want to jump into job design? No, I think we'll skip it. Let's jump right into innovative ideas for motivating, because that's what it's all about, right? Um, Motivating and being innovative in our motivation and in our processes for motivation. That's why we do all of this. So um, if you see here, organizations have various ways to motivate their employees. There's tons of ways that this. One way is using various types of incentive compensation to motivate employees, especially if they're extrinsically motivated for higher levels of performance. The most effective motivational programs really involve much more than money, as we learned earlier by those extrinsic rewards that we talked about. So. Um, and we need to empower people, right? So empowering people to meet their higher levels of needs. So empowerment is power sharing. This is one motivation technique. It's the delegation of power or authority to subordinates, to common people, and to employees. Empower them to make decisions, empower them to perform tasks as a way of motivation. Increasing employee power heightens motivation for task accomplishment because people really improve their own effectiveness, choosing how to do a task, really using their creativity because they are people with their own minds and brains and ideas and so forth and so on. So, empowering employees means giving them four elements that enable them to enact more freely to accomplish their jobs: information, knowledge, power, and rewards. So, the first is to let employees receive information about company performance. In companies where employees are fully empowered, all employees really have access to all of the financial and operational information. Also, um, make sure employees have knowledge and skills that contribute to company goals, because companies use training programs to help employees acquire the knowledge and skills they need to contribute to the performance. And so this is really helpful in terms of instituting an element into a motivational program. Employees have the power to make substantive decisions. So workers have the authority to really directly influence work procedures and organizational performance, even though quality circles are self-directed. And make sure employees are rewarded based on company performance. So organizations that empower workers often reward them based on the results shown in a company's bottom line. So empowerment can really mean encouraging workers' ideas while managers retain the authority, or it can mean employees have the freedom and power to make the decisions and exercise initiative. Um, so there's this continuum that current models fall along, from no discretion from workers to full empowerment, where workers participate fully in formulating a strategy. So let's summarize. Um, So, how does motivation and work environment encourage flow? So, managers, remember, flow is a state of feeling completely involved and focused on a task. Managers can increase motivation and foster flow by keeping employees intellectually engaged. Engagement being key, removing distractions, encouraging creativity and flexibility, and supporting employees in all aspects of their lives. Second question for you are: what are the intricacies of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, McClelland's three needs theory, and Herzberg's motivation or motivator hygiene theory? Maslow's hierarchy describes motivation as a response to a progressive set of needs for physiologically, safety, belonging, esteem, and self-actualization. While McClelland's three needs theory states that the main motivators are the need for achievement, affiliation, and power. Herzberg broke the idea of motivation into two categories, being hygiene factors and motivators. The distinguishing factors between extrinsic and intrinsic motivators. Extrinsic motivators are external, such as work, pay, or promotion, while intrinsic drives from personal interests, such as a sense of purpose and value in the work being done. Let's remember Vroom's model, your ERG model, um, as as well as your um, two what's it to the two theory model. So remember what we talked about our ERG model. Talking about existence needs, right? The three needs or the three categories being existent, relatedness, and growth needs. While Herzberg has a two factor theory, um, which involves um, Dissatisfaction, um, different from satisfaction, being that work motivation and employee behavior at work, it's different, right? So it involves the absence or presence of job dissatisfactors, I'm sorry, including pay, company, policy, so forth and so on. While good hygiene factors remove the dissatisfaction, being, those other things like opportunity for personal recognition, so forth and so on. Room, we went over that pretty clearly. And so the bottom line, guys, is just really look and review all of these different elements for motivation. I know that we went over a lot of theories, but they all sort of repeat the same thing. They all sort of kind of cover the same thing, just a little bit differently. The biggest one that's different, I'd say, would definitely be your expectancy theory. But we'll talk about it more in class. Our theories of motivation. Motivation is always a fun topic to talk about, but then just try to figure out where you are on the continuum. What motivates you? Are you motivated extrinsically? Are you motivated intrinsically? What causes you to be in your flow state? What could help you to do better? Which one of these theories apply to you the most? That's what it's all about, right? You as an employee, you as a student, and ultimately, if you're getting into management, understanding these so that you can best manage your workplace. Have a great week. I will see you in class.